As many of you probably know, last month we got the demo release for Outriders. This included roughly 2 to 3 hours of content, letting us play through the tutorial, the first few main story missions, and a couple of side quests. In the end, I played for way more than those 2 to 3 hours, trying out every single one of the classes and doing a bit of gear grinding, probably a tad too obsessively. And I came away from my time with the game with a somewhat mixed but leaning towards positive impression. For starters, I think Outriders had some really important things done right. One of the most important in a third-person looter shooter, of course, being the combat. I think the gunplay felt great, responsive, with decent animations and sounds, combined with classes that had interesting skills, made what I feel like was a pretty fun combat experience. And then there was just all of the different types of enemies we got to fight. Obviously, there were some basics like grunts with rifles, snipers, some melee swarmers, there were heavily armored enemies that would drop grenades on death. We had mini bosses with large health pools and 2 to 3 unique abilities, which actually made them difficult to take down. And then there were straight up boss encounters, fights set in arenas against bosses with these massive health pools and a wide range of skills. And then finally, one of the last key pillars to this kind of game is the loot itself, and it was pretty interesting. First, there's the mod system that's used to enhance your items, with higher rarity gear coming with more mods. And all of this plays also into the legendary weapons in the game, which come with these extra unique modifiers to them. But it wasn't all good. There were certainly some critiques that I had and some things that were not so great. First of all, the cover system. All around, I just felt like that was clunky and unresponsive, almost like we shouldn't even be using it. In fact, all signs, including the developer's own words, point to that being the case. The level design I felt was overly linear, much more so than I'm even used to in these types of linear-based games. For the visuals, I felt like these were a little dated. It actually reminded me a lot of that Defiance MMO. And lastly, I didn't love what we saw of the story, although generally story in my loot games isn't a deal breaker, so I can kind of let that one slide. Even though I have some critiques, like I said, I am overall positive on what I saw of the game. So I am looking forward to trying out the full release, especially knowing that there's still so much more to it that we haven't seen. The remainder of the story campaign with all of its new zones, enemies, and boss fights, the entire system of Endgame, which are called Expeditions, that have their own set of brand new locations, systems, and mechanics for acquiring loot. And then there's the loot itself, legendary weapons, item sets, and mods that will come together along with the skill system and show some potential for making an interesting looking loot game. On top of that, over this past month, the developer has been very receptive to all of the feedback they've gotten, going as far as to even patching improvements into the demo itself, which I think is a good sign. And that's actually what we're going to take a look at here today. What to expect in terms of the differences from what we played in the demo to what's going to be there in the full release version of the game. But first, we got a quick word from today's sponsor. Today's video is sponsored by Conqueror's Blade, the free-to-play tactical MMO set in a vast open medieval world where you pick a warlord, build an army, and create an empire. The game features epic 15 vs 15 online siege battles where you either defend your castle or send an army to bring down the enemy. You can create and customize your own warlord, powerful commanders with 11 unique weapon classes. There's over 80 diverse units between melee, range, cavalry, and more, and you can join forces with players around the world. Now currently they're celebrating Season 7 Wolves of Ragnarok by giving away 7 days of free premium time, which you can get with the link in the description below. Season 7 Wolves of Ragnarok is the latest free update and includes 3 new units, a new 15 vs 15 siege map, runes that can attach to gear for improved attributes, and Asgardian treasures from their latest battle pass. So once again, if you're interested in trying Conqueror's Blade and getting that free 7 days of premium, go ahead and click on the link in the description below. So to start things off, let's just talk about, we had what we played in the demo, and as we move into the full release, what's going to be new and what else should we expect from this final version? Well, the demo that we played included the very first part of the game. Again, we got to go through the tutorial and a few of those main story quests at the very beginning. This was contained roughly 2 to 3 hours of the game's content. Now, when Outriders officially launches, we're going to pick up from where that demo left off, continuing to progress through the main game as we leave that very first city and head out into the vast vastness of the world. This is going to give us full access to the game's crafting system that we didn't get to touch in the demo, as well as the remainder of the characters' levels, which include new skills and access to new talents, and all of the game's world tiers and a few other things. Now, they've said that going through the entire campaign is going to take roughly 40 hours to complete as we move through these brand new zones, encounter new enemies, and continue the story of Outriders. Now, we haven't gotten any specifics onto exactly how many zones there going to be, where the story is going, obviously they're not going to spoil that, or how many boss fights we're going to have, but we do know there's going to be more stuff, more locations, and about 40 hours of content from what we've played so far. Then, once we're done all of that, it's time for the end game, which for looter shooter fans is one of the most important parts. So upon finishing the story campaign, we will unlock what are known as expeditions. Points of interest will start popping up all around the world, and these will present players with new locations to discover and challenges that reward high-end resources for powerful gear. So when you jump into expeditions, you will start off in a camp where you find this map station pointing you to these brand new locations, which is said to be entirely new content. Nothing in these expedition areas is going to be recycled from the main campaign. So like in the demo, how we went through this one little section with all of these little fairly linear hubs and spokes, none of that is reused in expeditions. The expeditions are entirely brand new locations, as we've said. Now, they're calling these big handcrafted levels, and they're going to include their very own unique mechanics, challenges, as well as continuing some more story, backstory, and lore. These will be filled with hordes of enemies, various objectives to complete, puzzles to solve, and bosses to fight. Now, when you go in expeditions, you won't be getting loot directly from the enemies you kill. Instead, all of the rewards will come at the end, which plays into this challenge tier mechanic. So in expeditions, you will have challenge tiers. Each level of challenge tier will raise the enemy and loot level. But unlike the world tier system that we saw in the demo, these are also going to be time-based. The faster you clear a mission, the better your rewards. So as an example, challenge tier 1 will set enemy and loot levels to 31. If this takes you more than 30 minutes to complete, you will not get a bonus. However, between 30 minutes and under will progressively grant you better rewards up to a maximum of 2 epics, 1 rare, and plus 3 tiers if you clear in under 16 minutes. Now, beyond the bonus rewards, progressing through the challenge tiers also unlocks new locations. So in the beginning, you're just going to have a couple of expedition locations to go to. Now, as you attempt and clear the very first one, you're going to unlock a new one, and so on and so on. At the base, there are going to be 14 expedition locations that you can unlock, and when you complete that, you'll gain access to the final location, which is called the Eye of the Storm, which they haven't given much detail on, but they say this is going to be much bigger and more challenging than everything that comes before it. So we continue the main story campaign, which takes about roughly 4 hours. We unlock expeditions, and then we progress through these expeditions until we unlock all 14 locations, of which are supposed to be rather big, filled with tons of enemies, until we finally unlock this Eye of the Storm location. All of this whole endgame system is meant to provide a significant challenge for players who just want to progress their characters and earn better loot. Interestingly enough, in the game, the maximum character level is going to be 30, but the weapons and gear that you can get through these challenge tiers will go all the way up to 50. So yes, the enemy levels and the enemies themselves are going to get more difficult, but the gear that you get from these fights can go drastically above your base, your max character level. And they've also said that going through this stuff and to progress to the highest levels is really going to require good synergies between the classes and use of your mods and crafting. And then that goes into the other side of this, like yes, we have challenging content, but then there comes the whole customization aspect. So between the armor mods, weapon mods, legendary items, and each of the classes' skill trees, there appears to be a ton of different customization options and ways to tinker with your character to make interesting, unique builds. Over these past weeks, they've actually talked some about this, like on social media, they went into detail about one potential build for the Pyromancer. They called this the Fire Witch build, and it relies heavily on the skill usage, chaining Overheat, Phaser Beam, and Eruption. So the build utilizes the 4 pieces from the Lava Lich legendary set and 1 piece from the Reforged legendary set, and these sets include bonuses like the 4 pieces from the Lava Lich set give an increased damage to Eruption by 40% while decreasing its cooldown by 10%, but even more so, each piece of gear here has mods on them that will further improve skills. So with the Giga Blast, you will increase your Eruption radius by 100%, Size Matters increases the Phaser Beam radius by 100%, and then the Etna and Pompeii mods will add extra damage to Eruption. On top of that, they've got weapon mods with this build that will add a burn effect when enemies get hit, and then that burn debuff can be exploited by your Overheat ability. And collecting all of this gear and combining these mods and weapons and everything ends up with a playstyle that looks like this. You'll go into a big group of enemies, you'll hit everybody with Overheat, which will boost your anomaly power, but then also damages and marks all of the enemies, giving you their clear health bars, which will then let you easily see and line up your Phaser Beam to do some massive damage, and then you finish everybody off with Eruption, Rinse, and Repeat. So that was just one example that they've showcased of a potential build for one of the classes, and there's just so much potential between the use of the skills in your skill tree, what you pick to specialize, but then the gear and mods that you use, the weapons, just all of that. It's really looking like there's going to be a lot of diversity again for people who like to make their own custom builds. Fact of the matter is that in the demo, we only had access to a few points to use in our skill trees, and there's just going to be so much more that we can do when we fully unlock everything. And one big thing that they also point to is the fact that you can easily respec your talents for free at any time, allowing us to play around and tinker with these different things. There's also the crafting system that we didn't see any of in the demo. With crafting, you can improve an item's rarity, which will bump its stats if it isn't already an epic or legendary at the cost of resources. You can even swap variants of weapons, which will alter the way they fire, so you can change a bolt action rifle into an automatic sniper, or you can level up an item. So if you find a specific item that you really like while you're leveling, you can still use that, boosting its firepower or armor value. And since we didn't have access to the crafting in the demo, we actually never got to see the full breadth of the mod system, which gets a lot more interesting. Apparently there's over 350 different mods in the game, which will do things like add status effects to your weapons, inflicting freeze, bleed, weaken, or toxic, or even enhance your skills. Some of the high-end mods of the game can even give you abilities from other classes, like this Golem's Limb shotgun, where killing shots will grant you the protective golem effect of the Devastator for 3 seconds, or the Grimmaro LMG, which will give you some of the Trickster slow time effects. There are 2 types of mods in the game: the general mods, like the ones that will alter our weapons, and then those class-specific mods that can amplify and change class abilities. The Trickster could get 2 charges of Temporal Slice instead of 1, or maybe the Technomancer's rocket launcher could get increased damage, range, or ammo, or the Devastator could now impale multiple enemies at once instead of just 1. Mods are segmented as well into 3 different tiers, and these can be collected by dismantling any of the gear we find, which was something we could do in the beta. We could collect these mods, but we couldn't actually make any use of them. Now, once we unlock that crafting, we can then take those mods and mix and match them as we please, taking some mod we really like and applying it onto a new piece of gear. In a developer example, they showed themselves dismantling this lower level legendary like the Thunderbird, which would strike enemies with lightning, and then placing that mod effect into this legendary assault rifle Absolute Zero, which freezes enemies, so that they now have a weapon that will freeze enemies and strike them with lightning at the same time. So it's just some pretty cool potential combinations. There will be some restrictions here. So for example, if there are already 2 mods slotted into an item, you could only replace one of those mods, but nevertheless, it seems like there is going to be some flexibility. So as you can see, with what we've touched on here, there's clearly a lot more beyond the demo, you know, not just in terms of, yes, there's going to be more story and zones, but features with the Expedition Endgame features, the fact that we didn't have access to all of the skill trees, all of these different unique weapons and mods, the crafting system. There's so much more to the game. The demo just gave us a taste of it and an introduction, as we expected. So really interested to see how those expedition areas look and how replayable it was. But beyond all of this additional content, they've actually made improvements to the game based on a lot of the feedback that they've got from the demo. So they took to Reddit and talked about a lot of the changes that they've made. On launch day, a build will be coming that includes a multitude of general improvements, balancing, and bug fixes. Some highlights of this includes they're going to be fixing the issue of mods on some legendary weapons not working. They've made balance changes to various items, mods, enemies, and loot drops. They've added information about the internal cooldown mechanics for certain mods. There's also now a quick mark function for your inventory, which will let you mass mark all items based on their rarity in 1 or 2 button presses rather than having to mark every item individually. And they also said that they've made improvements to the cover system, which is interesting because we keep being told we're not supposed to use it, but they're making it better. Still don't use it. And then the final thing of note here is they said that DirectX 12 will now be the default setting for the PC. I think it was defaulted to DirectX 11, which was causing some issues for people. So yeah, some improvements based on the feedback that people have given them since the demo, and then just all of the additional content that we just simply didn't get to see. I want to also mention some important things about the launch itself. So in terms of launch timing, so for the console version of the game, they will be rolling out a midnight launch that unlocks on April 1st for your specific country. So in the US, that is going to be midnight April 1st, Eastern Daylight Time, EDT. But that's for the console version. PC and Stadia users are going to have a unified single global release on April 1st at 9 a.m. Pacific time, which is 9 hours later from the console version of the game. Now, their explanation for this is it's due to how the PC and Stadia stores are set up. And they also say that this time is the standard PC release time for Square Enix and has been carefully chosen to ensure that the maximum amount of support and partner staff are on hand to deal with any launch day issues. Basically, they're staggering the launches so that they don't overwhelm the servers with all of the console and PC players at once, and their staff doesn't have to respond to all of the issues that can come with an entire player base trying to play at the exact same time. I guess I understand this. It just sucks for us PC players who have to wait 9 additional hours. I mean, it's not the end of the world, but launch day is really exciting. Lots of people want to play it as soon as possible. So I think PC fans are probably going to be a little bummed that we have to wait 9 more hours compared to the console version. Something else that you might be bummed about as a PC fan is that this game is going to be coming to Xbox Game Pass on day 1, but only on the Xbox consoles. So it will not be coming to the PC version of Xbox Game Pass. So if you have Game Pass, you get this game for free or with your Game Pass fee. If you have Game Pass on PC, you still have to buy the game for $60. I am surprised that they're charging. If this feels like a solid $50 game, maybe 40 depending, but I think it's actually gonna be good. I'll say 50. I don't think it's $60 is a lot of money for this thing. We'll see. I don't know. I'm hoping it's good. Anyways, point being, what I saw in the demo, it was certainly good enough that I am genuinely excited for this. Like, I think Outriders could turn out to be really, really good. It's not always the case that I play an early build or demo build and come away with positive impressions. Just recently, I spent a bunch of time with the open beta for Magic Legends, and now I have zero desire to follow up with this game. It seems so bad. But Outriders, on the other hand, the demo, while it had its flaws, while I had my complaints, was overall getting me really excited. And I'm really liking what I'm hearing about the expedition system, about all of the potential customization and tinkering for characters and different builds between the skills that we choose in our talent tree, the mods that we use on our armor to modify those skills, combined with the mods on legendary weapons to kind of synergize with all of that. It sounds like there's some really cool things. A lot of it's going to really hinge at this point on how that Endgame Expedition system is. Like these 14 different locations, how long do they take? How's the replayability? Is it interesting to do these timed challenge runs over and over, trying to get that sub 16-minute mark on each one of these? And also that final thing, which at this point I couldn't find any details on exactly what this Eye of the Storm location entails, but is this going to be like a big open world area, even more so than what these expedition locations are? And set aside like the size of the locations that we're going through in the end game, I think on a positive note that I want to mention here is I've been hearing a lot that the developer is really kind of aiming towards delivering a Diablo-like end game experience when it comes to the gear grind and the importance and I guess the variety of builds and things that you can do. And that's something that's really exciting to me because I feel like for many games in the looter shooter genre, they've strayed away from that, and there's really only so many potential viable builds. Obviously, when you have any diversity with this kind of thing, there ends up always being like a best possible build, best in slot skills and gear pieces and weapons if you're trying to truly maximize. But I suppose the goal would be to have enough variety of builds that could work, even if they don't do things the fastest or necessarily the best, but builds that can work to clear the content, the hardest content in the game. Do you have a wide variety of different sets that you could use, of legendary weapons for all of the different classes that could potentially clear it, at least somewhat competently? You know, again, there will always be a best. People will min-max the hell out of these games, but it is nice if there can be things that can still be utilized that aren't the best, that people can still clear the content with. And I really hope that that's a direction that they push in while having this variety, because it's one thing to have variety, but if nobody uses the variety because some of it's just plainly not good, well then what's the point? You know what I mean? Regardless, I'm very, very interested. I hope this thing turns out well, and I am hearing a lot of things that I really like, combined with the fact that those core aspects of the gameplay, the enemy variety, the boss fights, and the loot system, I think are solid from what I played from the demo. The linearity of the levels, the bad graphics, I can look past this stuff if again, these expeditions deliver. So we'll see, but I think that pretty much does it. That is what you should know about Outriders before you play the game. And yeah, there you go. Thanks for watching. Thanks for stopping by. Hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one, all right? Take it easy.